From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Vampire in Brooklyn, released in 1995. Starring Eddie Murphy, Angela Bassett, and Alan Payne. Directed by Wes Craven. The synopsis is, Maximillian, the last vampire, seeks his only chance for love with Rita in Brooklyn. The story. After more than a decade of successful collaborations, Eddie Murphy needed one more film to finish out his obligation to Paramount Pictures, so he could go on to do the remake of The Nutty Professor. Vampire in Brooklyn became the vehicle as he, along with Vernon Lynch and his brother Charlie Murphy, came up with the idea for the story. First-time screenwriters Charlie Murphy, Michael Lucker, and Chris Parker wrote the screenplay, while horror movie maverick Wes Craven directed the film. The story is actually quite good, adopting a generic Dracula tale theme to it, and I think that's something that everyone can pretty much agree on. However, there are quite a few unique aspects to this movie that kind of puts a big smile on my face, and it's not because it's very funny. There are some funny parts in it, but it has a very unusual blend of things all put together. Now, the first 35 minutes of the film is a horror comedy that makes you really laugh your butt off. Then it turns into a full-out comedy, which you kind of don't really expect, for about 30 minutes. And then it turns into a romantic horror thriller by the end of the film, which is actually really the best part. All put together, it's quite wacky and I think an interesting roller coaster ride of a story. Now, the pacing. At an hour and 40 minutes, it's pretty decent for a runtime with all of the many things that's featured in the film. However, as I mentioned when describing the story, it feels like there were 3 movies in this one film competing with each other for screen time. The challenge. The challenge is Maximillian, our main character, who is the last vampire to exist, seeking his bride in Brooklyn. It's hard to describe him as an antagonist because we do experience much of the movie from his point of view, as if he were the protagonist. So I think that the lines defining this character is really muddled. Another piece to it is that there really isn't an epic reason why Maximillian needs a bride, such as repopulating the species or restoring a legacy. He's just a lonely soul that doesn't want to go on with life all alone. However, there's no denying that Max is quite a dangerous and vicious killer, and his underlying evil grows more apparent as the film goes on. Well, he's really after this girl Rita because she is a half vampire and he can't just mate with anyone. It must be one of his own kind. And in this vampire lore, vampires can't just be made by biting the necks of one's victims. You must be born to it or endure a particular set of occurrences. When Max sets out to romance Rita, it's actually quite an enjoyable part of the film because it's very romantic, but he also wants to corrupt her moral fiber. And one great example of this is when Max takes the form of her local preacher Polly. In a very hilarious display of words, he says, "Evil is good." And this is definitely a way that Max is trying to tear down Rita's faith. And to me, I think that's truly evil, to destroy someone's faith. It's weird because I have an affinity to vampires. I do want to see them together, but I also don't want to see them together because Max is not a nice guy. I mean, he's not just in the circumstance of being a vampire. He truly embraces the evil that makes it possible for him to take life. If Max destroys Rita's faith in humanity, he is going to be the only one that she can turn to, that she can identify with. I mean, it's not a bad plan for an evil plan. So in the respect of him being a challenge in the film, he's an excellent challenge in the film. Now, he gets a sidekick, a local lowlife numbers runner by the name of Julius, to help him with his mission. In a way, Julius is acting as the Renfield of the story to serve Maximillian. Julius is a loud, obnoxious, over-the-top character full of energy. And what I really liked about Julius's character is that the film does something quite unique with him by making him a ghoul and not just a guy who likes to eat bugs. And as the film progresses, Julius's physical body deteriorates and he loses precious body parts. And this is very reminiscent to An American Werewolf in London, released in 1981, where the character of Jack slowly rots on screen. Julius himself is quite annoying at times, so it's really hilarious when Max kind of snaps at him for it, and I don't know, I just love their chemistry together. It was quite entertaining, I would say. Now, the empathy. The character of Rita is the main focus in the movie, as she's really trying to cope with her mysterious heritage and her supernatural connection to the world around her. Rita is a loner, and she has no one to talk to about why she feels so different and why she feels so alone. She is a detective, and her partner, whose name is Justice, is having a very hard time believing everything that she suggests for various cases, which creates a lot of tension between them. So it's kind of surprising that the tension is somehow kind of leading up to a possible romantic relationship between the two. It's a story element that it feels a little forced, but luckily they don't dwell on it too deeply, but it's there. I just didn't understand why they liked each other, and maybe there isn't a reason why two people would like each other, but I just didn't feel like there was enough flirting. There was some, but I just didn't feel like there was enough. And maybe I'll inject a little thought process here, but maybe it would have worked better if they'd already had a relationship before the start of the movie. They were already seeing each other. Somewhere along in the story, it dawned on me that Justice was supposed to be the Jonathan Harker of the story. And unfortunately, Jonathan Harker is not a character that I typically enjoy in the Dracula tale. But Justice is responsible for being the physical representation of Rita's faith in humanity. The technical aspect. This is an interesting film because the director is Wes Craven, responsible for Nightmare on Elm Street and the Scream movies, which all have a very nice blend of terror and comedy. It seems to be a perfect fit for him to work with Eddie Murphy in this. And you can see brief moments of his cinematic touches here and there. There were some amazingly well-crafted scenes that were simply gorgeous to watch, where the sound, visuals, and music were choreographed with suspenseful perfection. The gore effects were both a hit or a miss for me. I was really surprised at how little there were in the film compared to most other horror films, and I didn't mind that too much. But I absolutely loved the makeup effects for Julius's deterioration. And there were a few continuity errors here and there, but on the most part it was good. Now the makeup effects for Max was where we run into some problems. I thought he looked really good, but the whole time while he was on screen, you could see the outline of the lace front wig and the artificial hair he was wearing on his face too. So it was very distracting if you noticed it, and most people do, unfortunately. Funny thing is that Eddie Murphy said that the wig his character wore was so awful that immediately it made people despise the film. And I beg to differ. I liked the hair and I thought there was a purpose for having it in the film, but it wasn't applied very well. The makeup for a lot of the characters that Eddie Murphy had to play were really, really good. But in particular, the makeup for Preacher Polly, and I believe the very last scene where we get the monstrous version of Max in his full vamp look. I believe that the latex was quite shiny and it looked very unnatural. And you can see all of the hard work that it was to put into these makeup effects, considering that it took several hours to put these actors into their characters. In 1995, these were top-notch effects. And I think that in today's standards, we've really upped the game. Now, the score was really incredible for the scenes it was used in. Amid the cinematic score was a great attempt to use a lot of big horns and drums to mimic the sound of many other of Eddie Murphy's films, like Coming to America, with kind of a hip-hop swing sound to it. The soundtrack was filled with a lot of popular late 80s and early 90s R&B pop music like Salt and Pepper's What a Man, MC Hammer's Pray, Superstition performed by UB40, No Woman No Cry, and If That's Your Boyfriend, He Wasn't Last Night. Performances. Okay, I thought that the performances were really good, okay? You know, I got a big kick out of seeing Eddie Murphy as Maximillian. The accent, the whole shebang, especially when he's having fun with it and being funny and doing like a lighter tone with it. In an interview, Eddie Murphy said that he only did the film to end his contract. But I think that we should look a little bit closer before we conclude that he didn't care about this film. He actually came up with the idea. He had his brother and production company involved with almost every aspect of writing the film. Let us not forget that he plays 3 roles, and all of these roles require more than 8 hours of makeup. So he really gives a lot in this film, and a lot more than people are led to believe that he just needed to end his contract. A simple rom-com would have done it, right? But, that's fine, but I think there's an audience for this movie. I really do. Not a wide audience, but an audience no less. And I'll hold up my hand and I'll be in that audience. Oh, and I wanted to point out one interesting little factoid. This movie has a really incredible similarity to Coming to America, released in 1988, where the main character in both films travels from afar to a borough in New York in order to find love. Angela Bassett was absolutely fantastic as Detective Rita Vedder. She's gorgeous in this film. I don't know, the makeup that they have on her is just like, it glows and it's just pretty and gorgeous. And she really sinks her acting chops into every scene she's in. So, she's giving it her all. I don't know, I just enjoy watching her in this film. Alan Payne was pretty good as Detective Justice, and he does his very best with the part. Kadeem Hardison was pretty outstanding as Julius Jones, nearly stealing the show. Later interviews, Kadeem Hardison said that he enjoyed working on the movie because it was a chance to work with Eddie Murphy, Alan Payne, and Wes Craven. John Witherspoon as Julius's uncle, Silas Green, was a delight. According to IMDb, this is one of his favorite movies he's been in. He's such a treat in this movie, and I absolutely loved his wit from beginning to end. John's character actually says bang, 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 repeating the same thing his character said in another Eddie Murphy movie, Boomerang, released in 1992. Zakes Mokae was excellent as Dr. Zako, who is the Van Helsing in this story. He actually gave the story a lot of the gravity that it needed. What a class act. Now the best part of the story. When this film shines, it really shines. There's so many little scenes that are just standouts. Just little things like the details that were put into the story. Like Max's ring, Max's coffin, the detail behind it, the sacred weapon, and Rita's cross that she wears. You can see that there was a lot of effort being concentrated on these little details. Rita paints her visions, and this was a nice way to see some foreshadowing in the film, as well as add an extra layer to Rita's character. Now, it makes sense when we find out that she likes Van Gogh's paintings because it connects with her on an emotional level. I noticed that there was a similarity in the hair textures between Rita and Max, which is also connecting them genetically to each other, to their vampire genetics, if you will. And I thought that was an interesting detail. I like the fact that Max had powers that were more like wizardry. I thought he had a very interesting power set as a vampire, as a supernatural being. I also really liked Rita's dream sequence a lot. The music that was used, the suspense that they built up, the jump scares, the Foley sounds, and the way the use of red foreshadows the vampire lust. I just loved it. It just, to me, that sliver in the story was almost like art. It was beautiful. Now the ending. The ending is as generic as you can get for a Dracula vampire film. It's got a lot of similarities to the ending in Dracula, released in 1979. But one nice thing that happens in the end is that Julius finds Max's ring, and somehow it's able to transform him into a vampire. It kind of leaves you questioning the powers of this ring. I mean, is the ability to be a vampire in the ring? Or is it connected to the fact that Julius actually has some vampire blood in him because Max gives Julius his blood in order to make him beholden to him in the beginning of the film? So maybe it's the combination of the blood and the ring. I don't know. It's just very interesting. Perhaps it's a plot hole, a vortex we'll never get ourselves out of, but it's just an interesting question that I have about the events in the film. I also thought it was cool that when Julius makes his transformation into the vampire, he actually assumes the accent that Max had. My wish list. So there's a character in the film by the name of Nikki that's sort of the Lucy of the Dracula tale, the sacrificial lamb. Nikki is the one for Max to seduce before his main lover. In this case, she's not drawn to Max because no woman can resist his powerful supernatural charm, but because she's sexually charged. She's killed in the story, which we expected, but the film goes in overdrive to shame her by having Preacher Paulie referred to her as the whore of Babylon, and Babylon being Brooklyn. And I think that was pretty harsh. I wish that was done more tastefully, perhaps giving us a great example of Max's powers of persuasion over other humans. Now, the script was pretty good from first-time writers. I think they did a great job. There were some really great moments when the dialogue really shines. But then there are some moments where it just had some missteps in continuity and even wording. For example, there's a scene in which Justice tells Rita that Nikki is dead, but the way he says it really didn't sound right at all. He says that she died the way you painted it, implying that Rita knew that Justice saw the painting and that we all knew that the person in the picture was Nikki, when all along they kept playing it in the beginning as if they didn't know it was Nikki. And as much as I loved Max's narration, it makes you think that Maximillian is still alive, but at the end he's clearly killed. So I don't understand why he's narrating and he dies at the end. Alright, so my enjoyment. Okay. Let's just say this. This is flat out my guilty pleasure. I admit it. Yes, it's official. I'm crazy, but I can't deny who I am. I do not just like this film. I love this film. It is hilariously good in the way I enjoy movies. So yes, it's got so many missteps and problems and things that should have been right, and somehow, though, when I watch this film, it makes me chuckle because it's so unusual and so wacky and so different than a lot of other vampire movies that I've seen, and a lot of horror movies that I've seen as well. So especially it's different from any Eddie Murphy film that I've ever seen. It's different from any Angela Bassett film I've ever seen. So it's truly unique in so many ways. And although there's some really weird moments, there are actually some uniquely delightful segments that I have to say I look at and I'm like, wow, this is really good. But it just couldn't stick the landing to be a film that really caught on with most audiences. It's a strange combination of cinematic elements, but it's a film that puts a smile on my face every time I watch it. My rating is a 7.6. That sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.